The crimson moon of Kethvar cast long shadows across the crystalline caves where Zarathek lay dying. Her breathing came in harsh, ragged bursts that echoed through the hollow chambers like the death rattle of some ancient beast. The Vorthak warrior's chitinous exoskeleton, once a brilliant emerald that struck terror into the hearts of her enemies, had faded to a sickly yellow-green. Dark ichor seeped from the jagged wound that ran from her left shoulder down to her abdomen, a parting gift from the hegemony patrol that had hunted her across 3-star systems. She had been the apex predator of her species, a living weapon forged in the brutal crucibles of the Outer Rim Wars. For 12 cycles, her name had been whispered in fear across 100 worlds. Zarathek the Bone Cleaver. Zarathek the Night Terror. The Vorthak who could track prey across the vacuum of space itself, and whose claws could slice through battle armor like tissue paper. But now, abandoned by her own kind and left to rot in this forsaken cave system, she was nothing more than dying meat. The betrayal still burned in her heart more fiercely than the infected wound. Her pack, her sworn blood brothers, had left her behind when the hegemony forces closed in. They had calculated her odds of survival and found them wanting. In Vorthak culture, the wounded were liability. The dying were already dead. It was logical. It was practical. It was the way of the hunter. But logic did little to ease the sting of abandonment. Zarathek shifted against the cold stone wall, trying to find a position that didn't send fresh waves of agony through her damaged torso. Her enhanced hearing picked up the distant sound of engines approaching the cave system. More hegemony forces, no doubt. They had been hunting her for days, following the trail of her blood like the persistent predators they were. Soon they would find this place, and she would die fighting as was proper for a Vorthak warrior. The engines grew louder, but something was wrong. The sound signature was all wrong for a military transport. Too smooth, too quiet. A single vessel rather than the usual squadron formation, the hegemony favored for cleanup operations. Zarathek's tactical mind, still sharp despite her deteriorating condition, began analyzing the audio data her sensitive hearing provided. The craft was small, lightly armored if armored at all. A scout ship, perhaps, or a civilian transport that had stumbled into the wrong system at the wrong time. Fresh prey. If she could somehow find the strength to hunt one last time, she might take some satisfaction in the kill before the larger forces arrived. The engine noise ceased abruptly, indicating the vessel had landed somewhere near the cave entrance. Zarathek forced herself to remain absolutely still, controlling her breathing despite the pain it caused. Her natural camouflage abilities, one of the traits that made the Vorthak such effective predators, kicked in automatically. Her damaged exoskeleton shifted color to match the surrounding rock face, rendering her nearly invisible in the dim light. Footsteps echoed through the cave system. Soft, careful steps that spoke of caution rather than confidence. The gate was wrong for any species she knew. Too long for hegemony troops, too light for Krillian enforcers, too measured for the chaotic scrambling of Zephyrian scouts. These are the steps of something new. A light beam swept across the cave entrance, casting strange shadows on the crystalline walls. The illumination was softer than standard military equipment, lacking the harsh blue-white glare of combat lighting. Instead, it emanated a warm, almost organic glow that seemed designed to comfort rather than intimidate. "Hello." The voice that called out was unlike anything in Zarathek's extensive knowledge of galactic species. It was pitched in mid-range frequencies, neither the aggressive growls of predator species nor the high-pitched chittering of prey animals. There was something almost musical about it, a quality that suggested complex vocal cords capable of subtle emotional expression. The footsteps continued deeper into the cave system, moving with purpose despite the cautious pace. Whoever this was, they were tracking her, but their method was all wrong. No scanner sweeps, no chemical analysis, no thermal imaging. They were following her trail, using primitive visual cues and what appeared to be an incredibly sensitive olfactory system. "I know you're hurt," the voice called again, closer now. "I can help." Zarathek's mandibles clicked softly in what passed for Vorthak laughter. Help! The concept was foreign to her species. Vorthak helped themselves. They took what they needed and discarded what they could not use. The strong survived, the weak perished, and sentiment was a luxury that got hunters killed. But something about the voice nagged at her. There was no fear in it, despite the fact that its owner was walking deeper into a cave system that reeked of Vorthak pheromones. Any intelligent species should have recognized the scent markers and fled. This creature was either supremely confident in its abilities or completely ignorant of the danger it faced. The light beam swept closer to her position. Zarathek prepared to strike, calling upon reserves of strength she wasn't sure she possessed. Her retractable claws extended with soft clicking sounds, their razor edges gleaming despite the dried ichor that coated them. She would make this quick and clean. The creature would die before it even realized what had happened. The light stopped moving. Its owner had found her. There you are. Zarathek struck with all the speed her damaged body could muster, claws extended, targeting what her enhanced vision identified as the creature's throat. But instead of the satisfying resistance of flesh and the warm spray of arterial blood, her claws met something that shouldn't have been possible. The creature had moved, not with the jerky, panicked reflexes of prey, but with fluid grace that spoke of combat training. Its hand had intercepted her strike, catching her wrist in a grip that was firm but not painful. The light source, she now realized, was attached to some kind of headband that left the creature's hands free. In the glow of that strange illumination, Zarathek got her first clear look at her would-be victim. It stood on two legs like many of the galaxy's intelligent species, but its proportions were unlike anything she had encountered. The torso was broader than seemed efficient, the limbs longer than optimal for most environments. Its skin was pale, almost luminescent in the artificial light, and covered with some kind of artificial hide that looked both flexible and durable. But it was the creature's face that truly unsettled her. The features were soft, almost childlike, lacking the prominent fangs, mandibles, or armored plates that marked a proper predator. Its eyes were forward-facing like a hunter's, but they were too large, too expressive, holding an intelligence that seemed almost familiar. When it looked at her, she felt an unexpected sensation. It was seeing her, truly seeing her, not just as a threat to be eliminated or prey to be consumed, but as something worthy of individual recognition. "Easy there," the creature said, still maintaining its grip on her wrist. Its strength was surprising, more than adequate to restrain her weakened state, but applied with careful control. "I'm not here to fight you. My name is Dr. Sarah Chun, and I'm a xenobiologist with the Terra Research Consortium. I've been tracking your biosignature for the past 2 days." Zarathek's secondary hearts skipped a beat. Terra. She had heard that name whispered in the darker corners of the galaxy's underworld. Earth, the mysterious third planet of an unremarkable system that had somehow produced a species capable of holding their own against the established galactic powers. Humans, the newcomers who had appeared seemingly from nowhere and carved out their own small corner of space through a combination of stubborn determination and tactical innovation. But according to every intelligence report she had ever seen, humans were weak, physically inferior to most spacefaring species, lacking natural armor, claws, or fangs. They compensated with technology and numbers, but in individual combat, they were considered negligible threats. This human, however, had just demonstrated reflexes that would have been impressive even for a Vorthak warrior in peak condition. "You're dying," Dr. Chun continued, her voice carrying an odd note of what Zarathek's translator identified as concern. "That wound is infected with something my medical scanner can't identify, but it's eating through your internal organs. Without treatment, you have maybe 6 hours left." Zarathek tried to pull her arm free, but found that the human's grip remained steady. Not painful, not aggressive, just immovable, as if the creature had calculated exactly how much pressure was needed and applied it with mechanical precision. "Why should you care about the death of a Vorthak hunter?" Zarathek managed to rasp, her vocal cords struggling with the unfamiliar language protocols her translator was feeding her. Dr. Chin's expression shifted into what the translator labeled as sadness. Because you're suffering and I have the ability to help. That's reason enough for me. The simplicity of the statement hit Zarathek like a physical blow. In her experience, help always came with a price. Alliance, servitude, information, territory. Something of value had to be exchanged. But this human seemed to be suggesting that she would provide aid simply because it was needed. Your pack abandoned you, Dr. Chun continued, her scanning equipment beeping softly as she ran it over Zarathek's wounded form. I've been monitoring hegemony communications. They're closing in on this position, but they won't arrive for another 4 hours. That's enough time to get you stabilized and move to a safer location. Zarathek's mind raced. This made no tactical sense. Humans and Vorthak had never been allies. If anything, they were natural enemies. Vorthak packs had raided human colonies on several occasions, taking supplies and occasionally captives for the arena fights. This human should be calling for backup or simply leaving her to die and claiming the bounty that her head would bring. Instead, Dr. Chin was pulling medical supplies from a pack that seemed far too small to contain the equipment she was removing. Advanced trauma gel, synthetic tissue matrices, broad-spectrum antibiotics that Zarathek recognized as military-grade. The kind of medical supplies that cost more than most species earned in a lifetime. This is going to hurt, the human warned, approaching with a device that hummed with contained energy. Your species' pain receptors are similar to Altaria nerve clusters, so I can use a neural dampener to help, but I need you to stay conscious during the procedure. Zarathek found herself nodding, though she couldn't explain why. Everything about this situation defied logic, defied her understanding of how the galaxy worked. But there was something about this human, this Dr. Sarah Chun, that inspired an emotion Zarathek had never experienced before. Trust. The neural dampener activated, and the constant agony that had been her companion for days faded to a manageable throb. Dr. Chin's hands moved with practiced efficiency, cleaning the infected wound with solutions that bubbled and hissed as they destroyed the alien bacteria that had been slowly killing her. The human's touch was gentle but confident, each movement calculated to cause minimal additional damage while achieving maximum therapeutic effect. Your bone structure is fascinating, Dr. Chin murmured as she worked. The way your exoskeleton integrates with your internal skeleton creates redundant support systems. Very elegant evolutionary design. No wonder your species became such effective predators. Zarathek stared at the human in bewilderment. She was being complimented on her physiology by the same creature that should have been fleeing in terror. Dr. Chin spoke about Vorthak anatomy with the same tone others might use to discuss a beautiful sunset or a well-crafted piece of art. Why are you doing this? Zarathek asked, her voice stronger now that the pain had receded. Dr. Chin paused in her work, looking up to meet Zarathek's gaze directly. Because every life has value. Because intelligence is precious and rare in the universe. Because you're not just a predator or a monster or whatever the hegemony propaganda says about your species. You're a thinking, feeling being who deserves a chance to survive. The trauma gel was working, sealing damaged tissue and stimulating cellular regeneration. Zarathek could feel strength returning to her limbs as her body's natural healing processes accelerated under the influence of the human medicine. But more than the physical healing, something was changing in her mind as well. For the first time in her life, someone was treating her not as a weapon, not as a threat, not as a resource to be used or discarded, but as an individual worthy of care and respect. The human's hands continued their skilled work, repairing damage that should have been beyond help, giving life back to someone who had been preparing to die. The hegemony forces will be here soon, Dr. Chin said, applying the final layer of synthetic tissue matrix. But I have a ship nearby, and there's a place we can go where you'll be safe while you recover. If you're willing to trust me. Zarathek looked at this strange, soft creature who had just saved her life for no reason other than compassion. In her culture, such an act created a debt that could only be repaid with a life. But something told her that Dr. Sarah-chan would not see it that way. This human seemed to operate by rules that were alien to everything Zarathek had ever known. Outside the cave, the sound of distant engines began to echo across the moon's surface. The hegemony forces were ahead of schedule. Soon this place would be crawling with soldiers and scanners and weapons designed to end her existence. But for the first time since her pack had abandoned her, Zarathek was not alone. "I will trust you, Dr. Sarah-chan," she said, struggling to her feet with movements that were steadier than they had been in days. "Lead the way." The human smiled, an expression that transformed her entire face into something warm and welcoming. "Call me Sarah, and welcome to your second chance at life, Zarathek." As they moved toward the cave entrance, Zarathek realized that everything she thought she knew about the galaxy was about to change. This human, this healer who had risked her own safety to save a dying predator, represented something new, something that challenged every assumption about strength, survival, and the nature of civilization itself. The engines were getting closer, but Zarathek no longer felt the cold touch of approaching death. Instead, she felt something she had never experienced before, something the humans apparently called hope. Sarah's ship was unlike anything Zarathek had ever seen. From the outside, it appeared to be a standard civilian research vessel, the kind of unremarkable craft that could pass through most checkpoints without drawing attention. But once they were inside, the Vorthak warrior discovered that appearances were deliberately deceiving. The interior was a masterpiece of efficient engineering disguised as mundane functionality. What looked like standard cargo compartments contained advanced medical equipment that would have been impressive in a military hospital ship. The navigation array was hidden behind panels that appeared to house atmospheric recycling units. Most impressive of all, the entire ship was shielded with technology that made it nearly invisible to conventional scanners. "Stealth coating," Sarah explained as she guided Zarathek to the medical bay. "Not military grade, but effective enough to keep us off most detection grids." The Terra Research Consortium learned early that sometimes the best way to study dangerous species is to make sure they can't find you. Zarathek settled onto the medical platform with careful movements, still adjusting to the absence of pain. The neural dampener was wearing off, but the trauma gel and synthetic tissue had done their work. Her wound was sealed and healing, though it would be days before she regained full combat effectiveness. "Where are we going?" she asked as Sarah activated the ship systems. The engines hummed to life with a sound that was almost musical, far smoother than the harsh growl of Vorthak vessels. "Sanctuary Station," Sarah replied, her fingers dancing over controls that seemed to respond to her touch with intuitive precision. "It's a research facility in neutral space, about 3 days from here. The consortium maintains it as a place where scientists can work without interference from political or military interests." Through the viewport, Zarathek watched the crimson surface of Kethvar fall away as they lifted off. In the distance, she could see the bright flashes of hegemony searchlights sweeping across the cave system they had just abandoned. The humans' timing had been perfect, their escape window measured in minutes rather than hours. "Your intelligence network must be impressive," Zarathek observed, "to track hegemony movements with such precision." Sarah's expression became somewhat guarded. "We have our sources. The consortium makes it a point to stay informed about military activities that might threaten our research teams." As they cleared the moon's atmosphere and entered open space, Sarah engaged what she called the autopilot and turned her attention back to her patient. She ran another medical scan, nodding with satisfaction at the results. "Your healing rate is remarkable," she commented. "Vorthak physiology is incredibly resilient. I'm seeing cellular regeneration happening at nearly 3 times the baseline rate for most species." Zarathek watched the human work, still trying to process everything that had happened. In her world, medical treatment was a privilege earned through strength and status. Pack healers attended to the alpha hunters first, and the wounded were often left to prove their worthiness to survive through their own efforts. The idea of receiving advanced medical care simply because she needed it was revolutionary. "Why did you really come for me?" she asked. "Your story about tracking biosignatures, that's not the complete truth." Sarah paused in her work, considering her answer carefully. "You're right. It's not the whole truth." She set down her medical scanner and leaned against the bulkhead. 3 weeks ago, Consortium Intelligence intercepted hegemony communications about a Vorthack war party that had been operating in the Outer Rim. According to their reports, the pack was eliminated except for one survivor who escaped wounded. Zarathek's mandibles clicked in recognition. "You came specifically for me. Not just for you. For what you represent." Sarah moved to a wall display that flickered to life, showing star charts marked with various symbols. "The Consortium has been studying the conflict between the Vorthack clans and the hegemony for the past 2 years. We believe the hegemony is using systematic extermination tactics designed to wipe out your species entirely." The display zoomed in on specific sectors, highlighting areas where Vorthack presence had been documented and then subsequently eliminated. The pattern was clear and chilling. The hegemony wasn't just fighting a war against Vorthack raiders. They were conducting genocide. "My pack knew this," Zarathek said quietly. "It's why they were so desperate to avoid capture. But they didn't tell me the full extent of what was happening." Sarah touched another control, and the display shifted to show hegemony fleet movements over the past year. The scope of the operation was staggering. Dozens of worlds, hundreds of encounters, thousands of Vorthack lives eliminated with clinical efficiency. The hegemony has convinced most of the galaxy that the Vorthack are nothing more than savage pirates who need to be eliminated for the safety of civilized space, Sarah continued. But the Consortium's research suggests something very different. Your species has one of the most sophisticated tactical minds in the galaxy. Your technological development was progressing rapidly before the war began. You were becoming a threat to hegemony dominance, so they decided to remove that threat permanently. Zarathek studied the data with growing understanding. Her people had always been warriors, but they had been evolving beyond simple predators. The pack structures were becoming more complex, their technology more advanced, their territorial holdings more stable. In another century, they might have challenged the established galactic order. So the hegemony struck first, she concluded. Exactly. And they're winning. Sarah's voice carried a note of anger that surprised Zarathek. Entire bloodlines have been wiped out. Cultural knowledge that took millennia to develop has been lost forever. The galaxy is becoming a smaller, more homogeneous place, and that's dangerous for everyone. The ship shuddered slightly as they entered hyperspace, the stars outside shifting to elongated streaks of light. Sarah checked the navigation display and seemed satisfied with their progress. That still doesn't explain why you risked your life to save me specifically, Zarathek pressed. One Vorthack warrior, even a skilled one, cannot change the outcome of a genocidal war. Sarah was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the swirling hyperspace tunnel. When she spoke again, her voice was softer, more personal. 5 years ago, I was part of a research team studying pre-sapient species on Kepler 442c. We were there to catalog biodiversity before the planet was terraformed for human colonization. Standard procedure, nothing controversial. She paused, lost in memory. We found something unexpected. A species of pack hunters that had developed rudimentary tool use and complex social structures. They were right on the edge of true intelligence, maybe only a few thousand years away from developing technology. Zarathek waited, sensing that this story was important. The terraforming consortium wanted them eliminated as a potential threat to future colonists, just wiped out like cleaning pests from a building site. They argued that pre-sapient species had no legal rights, that preventing future intelligent development was not technically genocide since they weren't fully intelligent yet. The pain in Sarah's voice was clear now. I fought the decision through every legal channel available. Spent 2 years in courts, appeals, scientific reviews. But In the end, bureaucracy and corporate interests won. The species was sterilized using targeted biological agents. An entire evolutionary lineage, billions of years of natural development, ended because it might someday become inconvenient. Understanding dawned on Zarathek, and now you see the hegemony doing the same thing to my people. On a much larger scale, yes. Except the Vorthak are already fully intelligent, already culturally sophisticated. What's happening to your species is pure genocide, and most of the galaxy is either supporting it or standing by and letting it happen. Sarah turned to face Zarathek directly. I couldn't save those proto-sapients on Kepler 442c, but maybe I can save you. Maybe I can help preserve something of Vorthak culture and knowledge. Maybe one survivor can make a difference. Zarathek considered this revelation. The humans' motivations were driven by guilt, by a failure that haunted her. But they were also driven by something more, a recognition that diversity, even dangerous diversity, was valuable in itself. What exactly do you want from me? Zarathek asked. I want you to live, Sarah replied simply. I want you to share your knowledge with our researchers. Tell us about Vorthak culture, technology, history. Help us understand what the galaxy is losing. And if you're willing, she hesitated, as if afraid to voice the next thought. Continue. Help us fight back, not with weapons or violence, but with truth. Help us expose what the hegemony is really doing. Show the galaxy that the Vorthak are more than the monsters they've been painted as. Zarathek was silent for several minutes, processing everything she had learned. Her pack was dead. Her clan was scattered or destroyed. Her species faced extinction at the hands of an enemy that had turned the entire galaxy against them. By every military standard, the war was lost. But this human offered something different. Not victory in the traditional sense, but a chance for the truth to survive. A chance for Vorthak culture to endure even if the Vorthak themselves did not. At Sanctuary Station, she said finally, "Will I be a prisoner?" "You'll be a guest," Sarah assured her. "Free to leave whenever you choose, though I hope you'll stay long enough to let us help you heal properly. The station is neutral territory, and we have excellent relations with several species that have no love for hegemony policies." Zarathek nodded slowly. "Then, I will consider your proposal. But I have conditions." Sarah leaned forward, listening intently. "If I am to share knowledge of my people, I want guarantees that it will be preserved accurately. No human interpretation, no translation errors that change the meaning. And I want to know exactly how this information will be used. Absolutely fair. Second, I want to understand your people better. Humans are new to galactic politics, but you've already shown capabilities that surprise other species. If I'm to trust you with Vorthak secrets, I need to understand human motivations and methods." Sarah smiled. "I think that can be arranged. Cultural exchange works both ways. And third, Zarathek's voice grew harder. If we do expose hegemony crimes, and the galaxy still chooses to support genocide, I want your promise that you will not try to stop me from seeking vengeance in my own way." The smile faded from Sarah's face. "Zarathek, promise me." The Vorthak's voice carried the authority of a pack alpha, demanding acknowledgement. "I am not a human, Dr. Chun. I do not turn the other cheek when struck. If justice cannot be achieved through your methods, I will pursue it through mine." Sarah was quiet for a long time, weighing the implications of such a promise. Finally, she nodded. "I promise. But I hope it doesn't come to that." "As do I," Zarathek replied. "But hope is a luxury that predators rarely indulge in." The next 2 days passed peacefully as they traveled through hyperspace towards Sanctuary Station. Sarah spent much of the time running additional medical scans and treatment protocols, ensuring that Zarathek's recovery proceeded without complications. She also began the delicate process of cultural exchange, sharing basic information about human society and learning about Vorthak customs in return. Zarathek found herself fascinated by human complexity. On the surface, they appeared to be a typical social species with standard pack hierarchies and territorial behaviors. But beneath that familiar structure lay something unprecedented in her experience. Humans seemed capable of cooperation across genetic and tribal lines to a degree that defied evolutionary logic. Your species forms alliances with groups that have no blood relationship to you, Zarathek observed as Sarah showed her historical records of human conflicts and resolutions. You share resources with strangers. You risk your lives for abstract concepts like justice and truth. How did you survive long enough to reach the stars? Sarah laughed, a sound that Zarathek was learning to associate with human amusement rather than threat display. Barely, sometimes. We've come close to destroying ourselves more than once. But somehow we always seem to pull back from the edge at the last minute. And now you want to save other species from destruction. Some of us do. Humans aren't unified in our approach to galactic politics any more than we're unified about anything else. But there's a growing movement that believes diversity makes everyone stronger. The consortium represents that philosophy. As Sanctuary Station appeared on their sensors, Zarathek felt a mixture of anticipation and apprehension. She was about to enter a world where the rules she had lived by her entire life might not apply, where strength might not be the ultimate arbiter of worth, where cooperation might be valued over dominance. It was terrifying and exhilarating at the same time. "Ready?" Sarah asked as they approached the docking bay. Zarathek straightened to her full height, her exoskeleton gleaming with renewed health. "I am ready to learn what it means to hope." Sanctuary Station defied every expectation Zarathek had about space habitats. Instead of the sterile, militaristic corridors she was accustomed to, she found herself walking through spaces that seemed designed for comfort rather than efficiency. The lighting was warm and variable, mimicking natural daylight cycles. Plants from dozens of worlds created small gardens in alcoves and common areas. The air carried scents that spoke of living ecosystems rather than recycled atmosphere. Most surprising of all were the inhabitants. As Sarah led her through the station's main thoroughfare, Zarathek encountered species she had only heard about in intelligence briefings. Ethereal Christians whose translucent bodies refracted light into rainbow patterns. Massive Gorath engineers whose rocky hides made them look like walking mountains. Even a few Zephyrians, whose reputation for timidity was belied by their confident interactions with the other residents. The station operates on consensus governance, Sarah explained as they navigated through what appeared to be a multi-species marketplace. Every sentient being has a voice in decisions that affect the community. It's messy and sometimes slow, but it works. Zarathek watched a group of younglings from 3 different species playing some kind of cooperative game, their different physiologies requiring constant adaptation of the rules. In Vorthack culture, such interactions would have been impossible. Young hunters learned to compete, not collaborate. The strong dominated the weak until a new hierarchy emerged. But these children seemed to be learning something entirely different. "How do you resolve conflicts?" she asked. "When interests clash between species with different needs." Communication, compromise, and sometimes creative solutions that serve everyone's interests better than the original proposals. Sarah paused at a viewing window that looked out over the station's central hub. "It's not perfect. We've had our share of disputes and disagreements. But violence has never been necessary to resolve them." They continued through residential sections where the architecture adapted fluidly to accommodate different environmental needs. Aquatic species had access to water-filled chambers, while others preferred the dim, moist conditions of cave-like spaces. Humans seemed to serve as bridges between the various groups, their adaptability allowing them to interact comfortably with species that might otherwise find each other incompatible. Sarah's quarters were located in the research section, a comfortable suite of rooms that combined living space with laboratory facilities. The walls were lined with specimens and data archives from her travels, creating a visual history of her work across dozens of worlds. "You'll stay here while you recover," Sarah said, indicating a sleeping alcove that had been modified with climate controls suitable for Vorthack physiology. "The medical bay is just down the corridor if you need anything, and the station's library has cultural archives from most known species." Zarathek explored the space with careful attention to detail. Every surface showed evidence of thoughtful design. The furniture could be adjusted for different body types. The lighting could be tuned to match the preferred spectrum of various species. Even the food preparation area was equipped to handle the dietary requirements of carnivores, herbivores, and more exotic metabolisms. This level of accommodation must be expensive, she observed. It would be, if we were trying to make a profit, Sarah replied. But the consortium operates on a different principle. We believe that knowledge and understanding are investments that pay dividends in ways that can't be measured in credits. Over the following days, Zarathek found herself settling into a routine that would have been unthinkable in her former life. She attended lectures by researchers from various species, each sharing insights from their particular areas of expertise. She participated in discussion groups where beings who would never have interacted in the wider galaxy exchanged ideas about everything from stellar engineering to cultural anthropology. Most importantly, she began working with a team of human linguists and historians to record Vorthak cultural knowledge. The process was more complex than she had expected. Human questions revealed gaps and assumptions in her own understanding that she had never considered. Tell us about the concept of pack bond, requested Dr. Elena Vasquez, a cultural anthropologist who specialized in social structures. How does it differ from family relationships in other species? Zarathek found herself struggling to explain something that had always seemed self-evident. Pack bond is deeper than blood. It is chosen, not inherited. When hunters swear the bond, they become extensions of each other, one mind in multiple bodies. But you mentioned that your pack abandoned you. Dr. Vasquez pressed gently. How does that reconcile with the concept of shared identity? The question hit Zarathek like a physical blow. In the weeks since her rescue, she had avoided thinking about her pack's betrayal in analytical terms. Now, forced to examine it through human eyes, she found contradictions that shook her understanding of her own culture. They calculated that I had become a liability, she said slowly. The pack's survival required sacrificing the weakened member. But if the pack bond truly made you extensions of each other, wouldn't sacrificing you be like cutting off their own limb? Zarathek was quiet for several minutes, her mind working through implications she had never considered. Perhaps, she said finally, the pack bond was not as strong as we believed. Perhaps it was a comfortable illusion that collapsed when tested by true adversity. Dr. Vasquez made notes on her tablet, but her expression was sympathetic rather than clinical. Or perhaps the bond was real, but your pack made a choice based on fear rather than wisdom. Humans have done similar things throughout our history when survival seemed to depend on abandoning fundamental values. This perspective offered Zarathek something she hadn't expected, the possibility of forgiving her pack without excusing their actions. Her abandonment became not a judgment of her worth, but evidence of their failure to live up to their own ideals. The revelation was both liberating and disturbing. Her daily routine also included physical rehabilitation supervised by Dr. Yuki Tanaka, a human physician whose expertise with non-human anatomy was impressive. The synthetic tissue had integrated perfectly with Zarathek's natural healing processes, but full recovery required careful conditioning to restore her combat capabilities. Your species' muscle fiber density is remarkable, Dr. Tanaka commented as she monitored Zarathek's progress through a series of strength exercises. The integration between your exoskeleton and internal musculature creates leverage advantages that I've never seen in other bipedal species. Zarathek appreciated the clinical admiration without finding it threatening. In Vorthak culture, discussing combat capabilities was often a prelude to challenge. But humans seemed capable of appreciating martial prowess without needing to test themselves against it. Could human technology enhance these natural advantages? She asked. Dr. Tanaka paused in her measurements. Theoretically, yes. But that raises ethical questions about augmentation and informed consent. The consortium has strict policies about modifying other species without extensive research into long-term effects. Even if the subject volunteered, especially then, Too often, desperation or trauma can compromise decision-making abilities. We've learned to be very cautious about irreversible procedures. Another lesson in human thinking. They possess the technology to enhance our already formidable capabilities, but their ethical frameworks prevented them from rushing into applications that might cause unintended harm. It was a level of self-restraint that few species practiced. On her 5th day at the station, Zarathek was introduced to someone who would change her understanding of human nature entirely. Commander Marcus Rodriguez was a military advisor whose presence at the research station seemed incongruous until she learned his story. Former Hegemony fleet, he explained during their initial meeting. 23 years of service, decorated veteran, fast-tracked to admiral rank. Until I started asking inconvenient questions about target selection protocols. They were sitting in one of the station's observation lounges, watching the slow rotation of nearby asteroids through the transparent aluminum windows. Rodriguez was a compact man with graying hair and eyes that held the kind of hardness that came from seeing too much of the galaxy's darker side. What kind of questions? Zarathek asked. Why we were spending so many resources hunting down small groups of Vorthack raiders instead of focusing on larger strategic threats. Why intelligence reports kept emphasizing the savage nature of your species while de-emphasizing evidence of technological and cultural sophistication. Why prisoner protocols specifically prohibited keeping Vorthack alive for interrogation. Rodriguez leaned back in his chair, his expression distant. I started cross-referencing mission reports with actual outcomes. What I found was a systematic pattern of deception. The hegemony wasn't just fighting a war against Vorthack pirates. They were implementing a deliberate extermination policy while telling their own officers that it was standard anti-piracy operations. Zarathek studied the human's face, looking for signs of deception or hidden agenda. She found neither. His words carried the weight of personal conviction born from painful experience. What happened when you reported your findings? Court-martial, charges of insubordination, and spreading defeatist propaganda. They offer me a choice: accept early retirement with full honors and keep my mouth shut, or face trial for treason. Rodriguez's smile was bitter. I chose door number 3. I resigned my commission and went public with everything I had learned. The consortium recruited you after that. Actually, I sought them out. Sarah's work on Kepler 442c had already caught my attention through military intelligence channels. When I learned about Sanctuary Station, I realized there were people trying to build alternatives to the hegemony's approach to galactic governance. Rodriguez stood and moved to the window, his reflection ghost-like against the starfield beyond. I've spent my entire adult life believing that I was serving the cause of galactic stability and peace. Learning that I had been an instrument of genocide, that changes a person. Zarathek joined him at the window. Do you regret your service? I regret that I didn't question orders sooner. I regret that good people under my command carried out atrocities because they trusted that the mission was justified. But I don't regret the experience itself. Understanding how the hegemony military thinks, how their command structure operates, how their intelligence networks function, that knowledge could be valuable in the right hands. The implications were clear without being explicitly stated. Rodriguez was offering his expertise in planning resistance to hegemony policies. Not open warfare, which would be suicidal, but strategic opposition that might save lives and preserve cultural diversity. What would such resistance look like? Zarathek asked. Rodriguez was quiet for a moment, considering his words carefully. Information warfare. Exposing the truth about hegemony activities to species that have been fed propaganda. Economic pressure through trade disruption in key sectors. Sanctuary for refugees from genocide operations. And when possible, he paused, meeting her eyes directly. Extraction of high-value targets before they can be eliminated. Zarathek felt something stirring in her chest that she hadn't experienced since her pack's betrayal. Purpose. The possibility of striking back at her people's enemies in ways that might actually matter. You rescued me as a test case, she realized. Partly. But also because you were worth saving in your own right. Rodriguez moved away from the window, his bearing becoming more military despite his civilian clothes. The question now is whether you're interested in helping us save others. Before Zarathek could answer, alarms began sounding throughout the station. The lighting shifted to emergency protocols and announcement systems activated in multiple languages. Sarah's voice came through the communication system, tense but controlled. All residents to emergency stations. We have hegemony ships approaching the station. This is not a drill. Rodriguez was already moving toward the door, his casual demeanor replaced by tactical focus. Looks like our conversation will have to wait. Time to see if our diplomatic status means anything to whoever's commanding that fleet. Zarathek followed him through corridors that had suddenly transformed from peaceful research facility to organized emergency response center. Species that had seemed gentle and academic moments before were now demonstrating efficiency that spoke of careful preparation for exactly this scenario. As they reached the station's command center, Zarathek saw the tactical display, showing 4 hegemony cruisers moving into attack formation. Their weapons were powered but not yet aimed, suggesting they were waiting for some kind of response. Sarah was at the communication console, her voice steady as she transmitted on official diplomatic channels. This is Sanctuary Station, a neutral research facility operating under Terra Research Consortium Charter. State your business and intentions. The reply came back in the clipped, professional tones of a hegemony fleet commander. Sanctuary Station, this is Captain Morrison of the HGS Retribution. We are conducting a search operation for escaped war criminals. Prepare to receive boarding parties for inspection. Zarathek felt her blood chill. They had found her. Despite all of Sarah's precautions, despite the station's neutral status, the hegemony had tracked her here. She was about to bring death and destruction to the beings who had shown her nothing but kindness. Rodriguez caught her expression and shook his head slightly. Not necessarily. Let's see how this plays out. Sarah activated the station-wide communication system. All residents, please remain calm and continue emergency protocols. This is a diplomatic matter that will be resolved through proper channels. Then, she opened a private channel to the hegemony ships. Captain Morrison, I'm DR. Sarah Chun, Director of Sanctuary Station. Under the Galactic Accords on Research Neutrality, you have no authority to board this station without specific evidence of criminal activity. What were criminals are you searching for? Captain Morrison's response carried the cold authority of someone accustomed to immediate compliance. Dr. Chun, we are pursuing a Vorthack terrorist responsible for attacks on civilian targets across 3 sectors. Intelligence indicates this individual may have sought refuge at your facility. Cooperation will be noted favorably in our reports. Sarah's fingers moved across her console, bringing up legal databases and diplomatic protocols. Her voice remained calm and professional. Captain, I'll need to see your warrant and evidence before I can consider any search requests. Sanctuary Station operates under strict neutrality agreements that protect all residents from political persecution. Doctor, this is not a political matter. This is a criminal investigation into acts of terrorism and piracy. Rodriguez leaned close to Sarah and whispered something that Zarathek's enhanced hearing caught clearly. Standard hegemony tactic. Reframe genocide as law enforcement to justify violations of neutral territory. Zarathek stepped forward, her decision crystallizing. Dr. Chun, I will not allow innocent beings to suffer for my presence. If they want me, I will surrender myself. Absolutely not. Sarah's response was immediate and firm. You're under consortium protection, and we don't abandon our people to lynch mobs masquerading as legal authorities. The Vorthack warrior found herself moved by the human's loyalty, but her tactical mind was already calculating odds. 4 hegemony cruisers against a research station with minimal defensive capabilities. Even if Sanctuary Station had hidden weapons systems, the outcome of a military confrontation was inevitable. Dr. Chun, Captain Morrison's voice had taken on a harder edge. You have 30 minutes to produce the terrorist or we will consider this station to be harboring fugitives. Such actions would void your diplomatic immunity under the emergency security protocols. Sarah turned to Rodriguez, her expression grim. How much of that is legal, and how much is bluffing? The emergency security protocols are real, Rodriguez replied, but they require specific threat conditions that don't exist here. Morrison is hoping you don't know enough military law to call his bluff. Sarah activated the communication system again. Captain Morrison, I'm transmitting our complete legal analysis of your claimed authority. You'll find that the emergency security protocols cannot be invoked without documented evidence of imminent threat to hegemony worlds or installations. Your presence here appears to be based on speculation rather than fact. While Sarah engaged in legal maneuvering, Zarathek found herself studying the tactical display with professional interest. The hegemony formation was textbook perfect for intimidation, but it revealed significant vulnerabilities to anyone familiar with their standard operating procedures. The lead cruiser was positioned to block the station's main traffic routes, while the other three formed a containment triangle. But there were gaps. Commander Rodriguez, she said quietly, your intelligence on hegemony fleet tactics, how current is it? Updated as of 6 months ago, through contact still in service, he replied. Why? Because that formation has a critical weakness that they might not realize you know about. Rodriguez studied the display more carefully. The backup sensor array on the port cruiser is positioned to avoid interference from the lead ship's communication array, Zarathek confirmed. But that creates a blind spot approximately 15 degrees off their starboard bow. A small ship could slip through undetected if it matched the sensor signature of local asteroids. Sarah overheard their conversation while maintaining her diplomatic dialogue with Captain Morrison. Are you suggesting we try to smuggle someone off the station? I'm suggesting that if someone were to leave the station voluntarily, drawing the hegemony ships away from innocent civilians, such a person might have a reasonable chance of escape with the right assistance. Rodriguez was already bringing up detailed sensor logs of the surrounding asteroid field. It could work. We have mining shuttles that are designed to operate in dense asteroid environments, with the right modifications to their sensor signature. No, Sarah's voice carried absolute authority. I will not allow you to sacrifice yourself to protect the station. There has to be another way. But even as she spoke, the communication system crackled with a new voice. This one belonged to Admiral Thorne, whose reputation for ruthless efficiency was known throughout the galaxy. Dr. Chun, this is Admiral Thorne of the Hegemony Third Fleet. I am now assuming command of this operation. You have 10 minutes to produce the Vorthack terrorist Zarathek, or I will classify your station as a hostile installation and act accordingly. The change in tone was unmistakable. Where Captain Morrison had been following legal protocols, Admiral Thorne was preparing for military action regardless of diplomatic niceties. Sarah's face went pale as she ran Admiral Thorne's name through the consortium databases. What she found there made her close her eyes in resignation. Thorne was the commanding officer for the Kepler 442C sterilization, she said quietly. He has a track record of interpreting his orders very broadly when it comes to eliminating perceived threats. Rodriguez nodded grimly. He also has political protection at the highest levels. If he destroys this station, the official report will justify it as a necessary action against terrorist sympathizers. Zarathek moved to the communication console and placed her hand on the activation switch. Dr. Chun, you have given me more than medical treatment. You have given me hope, dignity, and purpose. Allow me to honor that gift by ensuring that your work can continue. Before Sarah could stop her, Zarathek opened a direct channel to Admiral Thorne. Admiral Thorne, this is Zarathek of the Crimson Blade clan. I understand you are looking for me. The response was immediate, carrying satisfaction that made Zarathek's combat instinct flare. Zarathek, the Bone Cleaver, your reputation precedes you. I trust you're prepared to face justice for your crimes against civilized space. I am prepared to face you, Admiral. But not here, among innocents who have no part in your war against my people. There was a pause as Admiral Thorne considered this unexpected development. Are you proposing terms, terrorist? I am proposing single combat. Warrior. Zarathek's voice carried the formal cadences of Vorthack challenge protocols. You seek the glory of destroying the last of the Crimson Blade clan. Face me yourself, without hiding behind the weapons of your ships. Rodriguez grabbed Zarathek's arm, shaking his head frantically. Thorn will never accept individual combat. He's a fleet commander, not a ground fighter. But Admiral Thorn's response surprised everyone in the command center. Interesting proposal. However, I think a more appropriate response would be to demonstrate the superiority of hegemony military doctrine over primitive barbarism. I'll give you a sporting chance, Zarathek. Take one of the station's shuttles and try to reach the edge of the system. If you succeed, I'll consider the matter closed. If not, the Admiral's amusement was audible. Well, the galaxy will see what happens to those who threaten the peace. Sarah started to object, but Zarathek held up a hand for silence. She was thinking through the implications of Thorn's offer, seeing possibilities that the humans might have missed. And the station remains untouched regardless of the outcome. You have my word as a hegemony officer. Zarathek met Sarah's eyes, seeing a mixture of fear, anger, and desperate hope. Dr. Chun, may I borrow one of your mining shuttles? This is insane, Sarah protested. You'll be flying an unarmed civilian craft against 4 military cruisers. It's suicide, perhaps, but it's also an opportunity. Zarathek turned to Rodriguez. Commander, how long would it take to modify a shuttle's sensor signature to match asteroid composition? Rodriguez was already running calculations on his tablet. 20 minutes for a basic modification. But Zarathek, even with stealth capabilities, the odds are better than the alternative. Zarathek looked around the command center at the beings who had shown her kindness when she expected only death. And if I fail, at least my failure will expose Thorn's true nature to anyone monitoring the situation. Sarah was quiet for several moments, her mind working through possibilities and implications. When she spoke again, her voice was steady but determined. If you're really going to do this, you won't be flying alone. Dr. Chun, the mining shuttle has a 2-person crew compartment. I know these asteroids better than anyone, and my ship has more sophisticated stealth capabilities than anything in the station's inventory. Rodriguez nodded slowly, and if things go badly, having a human witness to hegemony atrocities could be valuable for later legal proceedings. Zarathek studied both humans, seeing determination that matched her own. These beings were willing to risk their lives for principles that transcended species loyalty or personal survival. It was a form of courage that she was only beginning to understand. Very well, but, Dr. Chun, if the situation becomes hopeless, you must promise to save yourself. My life is forfeit regardless, but your work is too important to lose. Sarah's smile was grim, but resolute. Let's focus on making sure nobody's life is forfeit today. The next 20 minutes passed in a blur of technical modifications and tactical planning. The mining shuttle sensor array was recalibrated to emit electromagnetic signatures, matching the iron-rich asteroids that filled this region of space. Its navigation systems were loaded with detailed maps of asteroid positions and movement patterns. Most importantly, its communication array was enhanced to broadcast on frequencies that would be monitored by neutral observers throughout the sector. Whatever happens out there, Sarah explained as they prepared for departure, the galaxy is going to see it. Admiral Thorn thinks he's staging a demonstration of hegemony superiority. Instead, he might be providing evidence of hegemony war crimes. Zarathek secured herself in the shuttle's secondary seat, her healing wound protesting the movement, but holding firm. The vessel was cramped by Vorthack standards, but its controls were intuitive enough that she could assist with navigation and system monitoring. Dr. Chun, she said as they ran through final launch preparations, why are you doing this? Your species owes mine nothing. If anything, Vorthack raiders have been enemies of human expansion. Sarah's hands moved across the control panel with practiced efficiency. Because this isn't about humans versus Vorthack versus hegemony. This is about whether the galaxy becomes a place where diversity is celebrated or where difference is seen as something that needs to be eliminated. The shuttle bay doors opened, revealing the star field beyond and the ominous shapes of the hegemony cruisers waiting in the distance. Sarah engaged the modified engines, and they slipped out of the station with minimal electromagnetic signature. Sanctuary Station to Admiral Thorne. Sarah transmitted on open frequencies. Your quarry has departed the station and is attempting to reach the system edge as proposed. Sanctuary Station claims no responsibility for subsequent actions. Admiral Thorne's response was immediate and confident. Acknowledged, Sanctuary Station. All vessels, begin hunting pattern Delta 7. Let's show the galaxy how the hegemony deals with terrorists. As the four cruisers moved into pursuit formation, Zarathek felt a familiar surge of combat anticipation. But this time, the feeling was different. She wasn't hunting for personal glory or pack dominance. She was fighting for the right of her species to exist and for the principles that beings like Sarah Chan represented. For the first time in her life, Zarathek was fighting for something larger than herself. The real test was about to begin. The asteroid field around Sanctuary Station was a three-dimensional maze of spinning rock and metal, or the remnants of an ancient planetary collision that had created a natural barrier around the research facility. Sarah navigated through this treacherous environment with a skill that impressed even Zarathek's predator instincts. Her movements were fluid and intuitive, reading the gravitational currents and momentum flows like a hunter reading tracks. "How long do we have before they detect us?" Zarathek asked, monitoring the sensor readings as the hegemony cruisers began their systematic search pattern. "Depends on how thoroughly they scan each asteroid cluster," Sarah replied, threading the shuttle between two massive chunks of iron or that would mask their heat signature. "Our stealth modifications should hold up to casual scans, but if they do a detailed molecular analysis, they'll find us," Zarathek finished. She studied the tactical display, watching the methodical approach of Admiral Thorne's forces. He's not taking any chances. 4 search patterns, overlapping coverage, no gaps for us to slip through. Sarah smiled grimly. That's because he's thinking like a fleet commander attacking a conventional target. But we're not trying to fight his ships. We're trying to expose his methods to the galaxy. On the communication array, multiple frequencies were active with transmissions from news networks, diplomatic observers, and independent monitors who had detected the unusual activity around Sanctuary Station. Admiral Thorne's sporting chance was being witnessed by thousands of beings across dozens of worlds. Galactic News Network to all vessels came one transmission. "We are monitoring the situation at Sanctuary Station. Please state the nature of current military operations." Admiral Thorne's response was measured and professional. "This is a routine law enforcement operation pursuing a known terrorist. All neutral observers are advised to maintain safe distance." But other voices were beginning to question the official narrative. A Christian diplomat transmitted from a nearby system. The individual in question was under consortium protection at a neutral research facility. On what legal authority does the hegemony claim jurisdiction? Sarah activated her own communication array, broadcasting on multiple frequencies simultaneously. "This is Dr. Sarah Chun of the Terra Research Consortium. I am currently providing transport for Zarathek of the Vorthak Crimson Blade clan, who sought medical assistance at our facility after being wounded and abandoned. The hegemony is attempting to execute an individual who has committed no crimes under neutral space law." The response from Admiral Thorne was immediate and angry. "Dr. Chun, you are harboring a known terrorist and impeding a legitimate law enforcement operation. Return to Sanctuary Station immediately." "Negative, Admiral. I am exercising my rights as a neutral observer to document your actions for later legal review." Zarathek watched the sensor display as the hegemony search pattern tightened around their position. They had perhaps 10 minutes before the cruisers would begin detailed scans of their current hiding place among the asteroid cluster. "Dr. Chun," she said quietly, "it's time for me to draw them away from you." "Not yet. I have an idea that might work better than either of us running." Sarah's fingers danced over the communication controls, opening a channel that surprised Zarathek with its destination. Sanctuary Station, this is Sarah. Patch me through to Commander Rodriguez on Priority Alpha protocols. Rodriguez's voice came through clearly despite the interference from the asteroids. Sarah, what do you need? Marcus, remember that information you gathered about hegemony targeting protocols? The evidence about systematic elimination policies? Of course. Is any of that evidence directly connected to Admiral Thorne's command decisions? There was a pause as Rodriguez accessed his databases. Actually, yes. Thorne signed off on 17 different anti-piracy operations that resulted in complete elimination of Vorthack settlements. His personal logs, which I obtained through intelligence contacts, show clear knowledge that civilian populations were being targeted. Sarah looked at Zarathek with an expression that the Vorthack was learning to recognize as determined hope. Marcus, can you transmit that evidence on open frequencies? All of it. It would end my intelligence network permanently. Those contacts would be compromised and probably executed. But it would also expose the genocide for what it really is. Rodriguez was quiet for several long seconds. When he spoke again, his voice carried the weight of a man making peace with necessary sacrifices. Transmitting now. All channels, full documentation, legal analysis included. Across the monitoring frequencies, the galaxy suddenly had access to decades of suppressed evidence about hegemony policies toward the Vorthack. Internal communications discussing final solutions and species-level security threats. Operational reports that contradicted public statements about defensive actions. Most damaging of all, Admiral Thorne's personal communications expressing satisfaction at the cleansing of Vorthack populations. The response was immediate and explosive. Christian Diplomatic Corps, to all vessels, came one transmission. We are declaring this operation to be in violation of the Galactic Accords on species protection. Any further hostile action will result in formal sanctions. Gorath Engineering Consortium demands immediate cessation of genocidal activities, came another. Our trade agreements with the hegemony are suspended pending investigation of these revelations. Even some hegemony allies began distancing themselves from Thorne's actions. Altarian Trade Federation calls for independent investigation into reported war crimes. We cannot support military actions that violate fundamental principles of civilization. Admiral Thorne's voice cut through the growing chorus of condemnation, tight with controlled fury. All transmissions are enemy propaganda designed to interfere with legitimate military operations. I am invoking emergency combat protocols and declaring this system under martial law. But his authority was crumbling even as he spoke. Sarah monitored the hegemony command frequencies as orders began flowing from fleet headquarters. Admiral Thorne, this is Fleet Command. You are ordered to stand down immediately and return to hegemony space for debriefing. Fleet Command, I am in pursuit of high-priority targets. Request permission to complete mission parameters. Admiral, your mission parameters have been revoked. Return to base immediately. Zarathek watched the tactical display as the hegemony formation began to waver. Two of the cruisers were already beginning to alter course away from the asteroid field. But Admiral Thorne's flagship and one other vessel continued their aggressive search pattern. He's going rogue, she observed. Personal vendetta has overcome military discipline. Sarah nodded grimly, which makes him more dangerous, but also more predictable. Thorne wants to salvage his reputation by completing what he started. Orders be damned. The remaining two cruisers began concentrating their search in the sector where Sarah and Zarathek were hiding. Their scans were becoming more intensive, and it was only a matter of minutes before their sophisticated sensor arrays would penetrate the shuttle's stealth modifications. Time to go, Sarah announced, powering up the engines. But as they prepared to break cover, Zarathek made a decision that surprised even herself. Dr. Chun, take us directly toward Admiral Thorne's ship. That's suicide. They'll destroy us before we get within weapons range. Not if we're broadcasting on every frequency in the galaxy. Zarathek activated the communication array herself, opening channels to every monitor in the system. Admiral Thorn, this is Zarathek of the Crimson Blade clan. I am approaching your position to surrender myself in exchange for the safety of all neutral parties. Sarah started to protest, but Zarathek continued speaking. Admiral, the galaxy is watching. If you destroy an unarmed civilian craft carrying someone attempting to surrender, your actions will be recorded by every news network in known space. Is your personal vendetta worth confirming every accusation that has been made against you? Admiral Thorn's response was a snarl of frustrated rage. You think you can manipulate me with threats of bad publicity? I'll show the galaxy what happens to terrorists who hide behind propaganda. The flagship's weapons systems powered up, their targeting sensors locking onto Sarah's shuttle. But before Thorn could give the order to fire, new voices joined the conversation. Admiral Thorn, this is Captain Harrison of the UES Wellington. I am ordered to escort the civilian vessel to neutral space. On the tactical display, a new contact appeared. A human warship, sleek and modern, moving at high speed toward their position. Behind it came two more vessels, both flying Terra Research Consortium markings. Sarah's eyes widened in recognition. The Wellington is Captain Harrison's personal command. He was one of the first human officers to reach flag rank in joint operations with non-human allies. Admiral Thorn's fury was reaching dangerous levels. Captain Harrison, you are interfering with a hegemony operation. Withdraw immediately or face the consequences. Captain Harrison's response was calm and professional, but carried unmistakable authority. Admiral, I am operating under direct orders from the Terran Defense Council and the Consortium Board of Directors. The civilian vessel is under our protection. The standoff stretched for several tense minutes as the two military forces faced each other across the asteroid field. Admiral Thorn had superior firepower, but Captain Harrison had legal authority and the moral high ground. Finally, Admiral Thorn made his choice. All weapons, fire on both civilian and military targets. Eliminate all witnesses. But as the flagship's weapons began charging, something unexpected happened. The other hegemony cruiser that had remained loyal to Thorn suddenly powered down its weapons and began broadcasting on emergency frequencies. This is Captain Rodriguez of the HGS Defiance. I am ordering my crew to stand down from what I can only characterize as an illegal attack on neutral vessels. Any crew member who wishes to be transferred to other commands may do so immediately. Sarah looked at Zarathek in amazement. Rodriguez? Any relation to our Marcus? His younger brother, came Marcus Rodriguez's voice through their communication system. I may have mentioned the evidence we were transmitting to certain family members still in active service. Admiral Thorn found himself commanding a single cruiser against 3 human warships, with his actions being broadcast to the entire galaxy, and his own officers beginning to question his orders. The tactical situation had become impossible, but rage had overcome reason. Thorn's flagship opened fire on Sarah's shuttle, energy beams lancing through space toward their position. The beams never reached their target. Captain Harrison's Wellington intercepted the attack, its shields absorbing the energy while its own weapons replied with precise shots that disabled Thorn's weapon systems without destroying his ship. Admiral Thorn, Captain Harrison transmitted on open frequencies, you are under arrest for war crimes, violation of neutral space, and attempted murder of civilians. Surrender your vessel immediately. The aftermath unfolded with swift efficiency. Admiral Thorn was taken into custody by a joint human-Christian tribunal. The evidence Rodriguez had transmitted led to investigations that exposed the full extent of hegemony genocidal policies. Several member species withdrew from hegemony agreements, while others demanded fundamental changes in military protocols and oversight. Most importantly for Zarathek, the revelations led to a galaxy-wide discussion about species rights and the value of diversity. Vorthak, who had been hiding in the outer systems, began emerging, sharing their own stories and cultural knowledge. What had been painted as a species of savage pirates was revealed to be a complex civilization with rich traditions and sophisticated technology. 3 months later, Zarathek stood on the observation deck of an expanded sanctuary station, watching ships from dozens of worlds arrive with refugees, researchers, and diplomats. The station had become a symbol of interspecies cooperation and a haven for those fleeing persecution. Sarah joined her at the viewing window, carrying data tablets filled with reports from across the galaxy. The Vorthak settlement on Kepler 7 is thriving, she reported. 53 individuals so far, including 2 entire family groups that escaped the hegemony cleanup operations. Zarathek nodded, feeling satisfaction at her people's survival, but also something deeper. Purpose beyond personal or even species survival. And the other refugee groups? Growing. We've established sanctuary protocols for 17 different species facing persecution or extinction. The consortium has tripled its funding, and we're getting support from governments that previously stayed neutral on these issues. They watched a transport ship dock at the station's main port, its cargo holds filled with beings seeking safety and hope. Among them, Zarathek could see the proud bearing of Vorthak warriors, the flowing forms of Christian artists, and the steady movements of Gorath engineers. Dr. Chun, she said, using the formal address that had become affectionate rather than distant. When you saved my life in that cave, did you envision this outcome? Sarah smiled, the expression warm with satisfaction and anticipation. I hope we might save a few lives and preserve some cultural knowledge. I never imagined we'd help trigger a galaxy-wide movement for species rights. And yet that is exactly what happened. One act of compassion toward a dying predator changed the course of history. Sarah considered this, watching the diverse crowd of beings moving through the station's corridors. Maybe that's the real human contribution to galactic civilization. Not superior technology or military might, but the idea that individual acts of kindness can have consequences far beyond what anyone imagines. Zarathek thought about her pack, her clan, her species' long tradition of predatory competition and survival of the strongest. Then, she thought about Sarah risking her life to save a stranger, about Rodriguez sacrificing his intelligence network to expose genocide, about Captain Harrison protecting civilians at potential cost to his career. These humans had shown her a different kind of strength, not the power to destroy, but the courage to protect, not the ability to dominate, but the wisdom to cooperate, not the instinct to take what they needed, but the choice to give what others required. Dr. Chun, she said, I believe I understand now why your species has been so successful despite your apparent physical limitations. Oh, what's our secret? Zarathek smiled, an expression that no longer carried any trace of predatory threat. You have weaponized hope. You have made compassion into a tactical advantage. And you have demonstrated that the strongest predator in the galaxy is not the one who kills the most efficiently, but the one who saves lives most effectively. Sarah laughed, the sound carrying across the observation deck, and mixing with the voices of dozens of species working together toward common goals. Welcome to humanity, Zarathek. I think you're going to fit in perfectly. Outside the viewing window, the stars shone with the light of 1,000 worlds where beings could now look forward to futures defined not by fear and competition, but by cooperation and mutual respect. It was a galaxy where a dying Vorthak warrior could become a symbol of hope, where a human healer could change the course of interstellar politics, and where compassion could prove more powerful than any weapon. It was a galaxy worthy of the name civilization. And at its heart, in a space station that had started as a simple research facility, representatives of that civilization worked together to ensure that no being would ever again face extinction alone.